Okay, so I'm going to do this segmentation of this mandible just in real time here, just to show my technique for doing it and give you a realistic expectation of how long it's going to take. So I am going to work full speed. First thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and get this set to the default rendering. I want to make it as clear as it can possibly be, and I want to make sure that when I push create model that this is accurate to the size of the actual mandible. So we can actually know that by turning on this hint and then just simply looking here and verifying that it does in fact correspond with the bone. If I go too far this way, it's going to get excessively under contoured, and if I go this way, it's going to get excessively over contoured like that. And so I don't mind being a little bit over contoured, but I don't want it to the point where I start getting this distortion and that kind of thing. So I need to back off of this a little bit more. And that looks appropriate, and this looks like it's going to be a good smooth rendering. So now I'll push create model. Okay, so now that it's done that, we have our segmented jaw. This is the one we expect to have some porosity. It's not going to be adequate just as is, but I do want to take a look at the hint and just see how severe all that porosity is. And what I'm seeing is a really well defined cortical bone on the lingual and on the buccal, and I'm really only seeing those issues of porosity right up top on the crest. So that for me is going to simplify things, because I don't need to do this whole mandible. Basically, if I could do from right here up, that would pretty much fill in all the gaps, other than the very smallest ones, which I can easily fix in Mesh Mixer. So based on that, I'm going to go ahead and go to model editing, and I'm going to go to the segmentation panel and do advanced jaw segmentation. And here's where this is going to save us some time, because again, we don't need to do the whole thing. We're going to just do right up here on the crest. And I'm looking up here in that upper left window, and that looks like it's going to be just the right amount. So click next. And we've only got 9 slices here to do, but the trade-off is that you do need to do these as accurately as possible, because again, this is your most important part. This is where a guide's going to sit. So I just did that. That is way too radio dense, I guess. This is set to a very low minimum density, so I need to raise that up a whole lot. And I'm going to Control Z, get rid of that. And let's just try another small area. That looks better, but it could stand to be a little bit less aggressive. Let's do that. Alright, that's looking great. So obviously want it to capture as much as possible. I'm going to keep pushing the boundary until I start seeing excessive scatter. I'm not seeing anything out there. I'm going to reduce it again. And now I'm starting to see that. I'll Control Z, and 475 looks like it's the number. So now let's just do our slices, and we're going to need to close this in. And then we need to look at any little spicules that might be being left out. We need to include those. Again, if you're going to err towards including stuff, because if it's not there, it just creates a small void in the guide. But if that is bone, and you don't include it, then that's going to obviously prevent it from seeding. We'll click next. Intelligent lasso. That looks like it's captured everything. Let's maybe extend that. And I need to grab this little area. And now we've only got this tiny area to do here. Little holes there, and that looks good. Okay. We'll go ahead and proceed with the axial slices. Now I fully intend to go back and add quite a few more of these. And in fact, one of the cool things you can do, you see how right now if I push fill holes, the most apical slice that we did was right here, which means I didn't capture any of that. So let's actually back up a step. While we're in this axial view, what I like to do is go all the way to the very first slice, right there. Now in this case there's nothing there, but I would define that one. That's going to give me an upper boundary. Now I want to go to the very last one. Okay, you see where it goes black, and right there. Let's go ahead and do this slice in addition to the other axials, because that's going to give us a lower boundary, and you'll see what I mean there in just a second. Alright, now back to this step. Now do you see when I push fill holes? Because I've got that slice defined at the very bottom, that's going to give me the ability to push fill holes and completely fill that in. Now, again, if I back up one step again, remember here I went to the very upper extent, but that's way out in no man's land. So I do want to come up here and get to where I'm just at the crest of the ridge. Maybe like right there. And I do want to fill in that slice. Alright, so now you see how I also have this as an upper boundary. So it's just going to make this go a lot more efficiently. Those are slices we would have gone back and done anyway. And now my fill hole function is a lot more effective, and that means less overall work. Not sure if that's actually bone, but I'm going to include it. Notice I haven't really had to use the brush at all since we took the time to do that last step. Now this one's going to be an exception. I'm not sure if that's bone or not, but I'm going to include it. Alright, now it's taken me back to these axial slices. Let's back up here. Now it's wise to do, if you're going to add any additional slices, it's wise to do the exact same thing that I just showed, but this time on your cross sections. Okay, so here's the very first slice. And notice it fills in very easily. Now let's go to the other end. Alright, right there. And I do need to use the eraser for the first time. Alright, now you didn't necessarily have to do that. I would recommend it. It's going to only make your life easier, because while you could export this in its current form, it won't be perfect, but combined with the other, it's going to be. But suppose you wanted to do this with segmentation alone. You don't want to depend on doing my little shortcut hack in Mesh Mixer. Then you would want to go in and do a lot more additional slices here. And so I like to do those in different views. For example, the sagittal view. And I'm just trying to think in 3 dimensions of what would give the computer the most data points to fill this in properly, so I don't have to keep coming back and redoing this and redoing this. So I'm going to get just a few slices in this area. Notice again, very little effort, because the fill hole functions work better having the outer boundaries defined. And then I'm going to come back this direction. Now don't worry about going excessively beyond here. It may not include that data. You're really focused up here, but I'm not trying to keep absolutely away from this stuff that's not in the highlighted area. Scroll a bit more. We're basically toward the end here, but I'm going to go into some other views still and do the exact same thing. The more variety of views you can do with this, the more effective this segmentation is going to be on its own. Let's look at this tangential slice. And notice I'm kind of selectively looking at where I want to do my additional slices. And like for here example, you can see a big porosity right there. That's clearly going to be a helpful thing for the computer to know. It missed it in the first round. So if we can give it enough data points for it to know that that is bone, then surely it's going to include it with the final segmentation. Let's go right there. That looks like that may be a good one to do since there's a big hole there. Definitely that slice. So what you're seeing is I'm doing an awful lot more slices here than is being recommended. But I'm taking some educated guesses that help me to really be confident that this is going to give a better segmentation. Okay, this anterior ridge has a lot of little wispy pieces of bone. It'd be good to go ahead and include those. Definitely right there. And definitely right there. Alright, what are some other areas we can do? We can look in here and, like, once again, a little wispy area like that, let's go ahead and tell the software that that is bone so it doesn't miss it. And we'll go a little excessive on that. And then right here, I'm really not entirely sure if this is bone or not. That one is is a little bit more tricky. Go ahead and include that, and I want to jump over here to a cross section and get a better look at that spot. So that's not bone. The reason this is falling outside there is because the area I thought I was just including is really artifact. So I need to go back to that previous slice here, wherever that was. Cross sections. Yeah, it was this one. I just need to go back and find where I did that. Right here. So this area is not bone. I'm going to use the negative lasso and get rid of that. Alright, I'm probably beating a dead horse. I'm pretty confident on a mandible like this that we've got more than enough data for this to do a really nice job. I'm trying to give you a demonstration of how I would do this really without having to depend so heavily on Mesh Mixer, because I know many people are averse to that. Just to make absolutely certain it's the best it can be, I'm also going to take what I think will be a perfectly fine segmentation and combine it with this other one. Okay, so the segmentation is finished, and you can see that it's just a small area up here on the crest of the ridge, but let's turn on, actually we need to go ahead and create the model. So I usually like to push smooth a time or two. I've never found that to be detrimental to anything, and it makes for a nicer model. And now I'm going to create surface. There we go. I'll change the color, make it blue. So now you see all those areas of porosity on the crest are filled in, and all this really dense bone out here, which had great boundaries anyways that were going to segment perfectly, you know, we've got the best of both worlds. So let's go ahead, just to have a complete model and not just one of the very top of the ridge, let's go ahead and do the Mesh Mixer hack. And I will do that by exporting. I'm going to go ahead and export these nerves too. I like to make these jaw models with the nerves subtracted out of them. So let's just do that for the heck of it. Exporting them all together. You know, I don't have this box checked to export to different folders. Going to save this in my download. Alright, and now I go to Mesh Mixer, import it, segment to jaw. Okay, now I obviously don't want the nerves to be part of my solid, so I'm going to go ahead and select them. And I could just maybe click a point on each of these, hit E for expand to connected, and then hit Y on the keyboard to separate it, and I'm going to just hide those for the moment. I'm focused on this. Alright, let's go ahead and just make this solid, edit, make solid. Remember, this is both of those jaws combined together, but they're in separate shells right now. Doing this is combining them, obviously. I want to make the solid type accurate with the highest accuracy. I like to go midway on the mesh density and update it. Okay, so we'll accept this. Now this is still not as watertight as I would like it to be. For purposes of guided surgery, the exterior is great. There's no problems right here where a guide would seat. You could stop here and you'd be perfectly fine. This is optional what I'm going to do now, but I like to make these you know, a completely solid watertight jaw. So stuff like this is obviously going to be problematic for that, right? There's a few ways we can deal with it. We can go ahead and separate out that little inside portion from the outside portion. And I'm doing that by just going around the boundary of any of those porous areas, and then I'm just going to delete that. Okay. Now, if I just push, repair on this, it's going to warp this in some funky manner. I don't want to do that. So if I wanted to kind of give it some head start on the shape of this mandible, I could maybe select Control Z. I use a lot of Control Z. I could maybe connect these two areas. Okay, that's the bridge function. It's Control B on your keyboard. I'll accept it. I could get a really big brush like this and delete out a big chunk of the portion that I'm wanting to get rid of. Okay. This is obviously going to have to get filled in. So let's make the brush smaller. And I'm going to do a little patch from there to there. Control B, it doesn't work. Why did it not work? You see this little individual triangle? That's a problem. So I need to get rid of that. It does need, a boundary that it can work with here, meaning there's not standalone triangles that are going to throw it for a loop. I'm still getting that. So I'm going to just try a different area. Maybe a smaller area from there to there. Let's see. Okay, and that worked great. So now I could run an analysis and repair, and it's going to make a flat wall here and a flat wall on top, which is the shape I'm going for. So let's go ahead and do that. Inspector, let's just flat fill them at this point. Auto repair all. Okay, that worked. Now it did make this little funky something here. Okay, I don't like that. I could let it fill that in. It's a non-critical area, but I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little more work on this before I take that step. Okay, let's delete that. Let's delete this piece sitting up underneath there. And what if we just bridged from there to there? Accepted it. If we deleted this, that's going to leave one hole to fill across there. Let's delete that. And let's delete that. Notice these are all smooth areas where the software, even if I delete that, if it fills it in, it's going to fill it in the exact same way. So I don't have to get too uptight about what I'm deleting here. Alright. What if we connected that to that? So I'm basically cutting this into little smaller areas where it's going to fill in when I do this automatically. Okay. Let's give that another try on the repair. So analysis, inspector, tons of errors obviously. Remember, a lot of those are because we've disrupted that mesh, what it thought was solid, by opening up all of these new holes. So now there's all these little bits of triangles just floating up inside of this STL, and it's getting rid of those. Okay. Now it was clearly unable to fix some of it, because remember, the inside of this is all of that, you know, mangled up bits of triangles. It just can't repair it. It can't find a way to close that up adequately. I'm going to go ahead and repeat on this side. I'm probably not going to narrate this whole side. I'm just going to power through it. Having all that out of the way would be nice, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, but I don't want to delete this just yet. We'll deal with it here in a minute. Alright, deleted those things. Bridge here to here. Now this defect I know is going to cause me issues, so I'm going to just cut to the chase, get rid of this internal portion. You know, are we really worried if we don't get an absolutely perfect rendering on the underside of the mandible? It doesn't matter. Let's just go ahead now and close that back in. You'd never even know the difference once that fills in here in a moment. Okay. Analysis again, inspector, auto repair. There we go. And we still got 3 errors. Now remember, there's a couple other spots we're going to have to deal with. Okay, so I'm going to get a spot size about like this. I'm going to go ahead and try to delete any of these little areas that are connecting inside mesh to outside mesh. I want just one solid outer mesh that is watertight. Okay, so I'm going to keep finding any little errors like that and deleting them. This is obviously a problem up here where this is connecting in, so easiest thing is just go aggressively around it, and now just erase back right to the level of that framing. Delete it. That should have disconnected the inside and the outside, as you see there. Let's look for any over here. I'm not sure what that is, but I'd rather delete it and fill it in. So I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of them. This is probably going to be problematic. And even if that is a tiny void, I would rather it smooth it over for sake of a guide fitting. If you have little errors like that, you know, this is just distortion, you could delete those. You know, trim back the excessive areas or erase it. And then it's very common to have some right down in here. This is a very thin area usually, so it will often not have a thick enough cortical plate to give a really solid rendering. I'll show you here in a moment how we'll be able to tell if it is still connecting anywhere inside to outside. Okay, that's clearly a spot where it is. Erase back. tell about that little area, but I think I've got everything. So let's go ahead and find out. Inspector, let's fill them in. Let's make sure we're happy with how it filled them in. It all looks good to me. And now we know we've still got some bits of floating mesh inside, because remember, we've still not dealt with those. How can we find out? Well, a bunch of ways you could. One easy one is just, you're going to have a flat area down here at the bottom extent of this. So even if you deleted all this, if you just repair it with a flat fill, then it's no problem. So now I can see all that stuff inside. Now how do I get rid of it? Well, what I can do is, again, I hope that I have detached all of the outer shell from all of the inner shell. So let's try. I'm going to click on this, which would be the outer shell, Control E, which is, oh no, that's not it. Let's see, is it Shift E? Control E. I'm having a mental breakdown here. Modify, expand to connect. Oh, it's just the E. Okay, sorry. If I'd have just hit the E and not Control E, it would have expanded this to everything connected, which again, I hope is that entire outer shell. Now I don't want to get rid of that though. I want to get rid of all that stuff inside. So let's push I on the keyboard for invert. And now it's going to deselect that and select everything else, such as the inner mesh, which I hope is completely detached. I can't really see because it's inside out, but I can push delete because it's all selected. Let me try that one more time. I for invert and delete. And so no, it is not fully disconnected. So I need to go looking for where it's connected, and I think I've already found it. See that? That is the culprit. And maybe right back there. Let's look at where those are. It's these little dinky spots like that. Okay. I'm going to just be a little overzealous here. And anything I even remotely suspect is still connecting it, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of. Like maybe that. I don't know. But those look suspicious. Okay, let's delete that. Let's run the test again. Select this entire object, the outer shell, invert, delete. Aha, you see? All of it just disappeared because we finally broke all of those connections between the inner shell and the outer shell. And now I can simply run an analysis. Again, you kind of looked at this hopefully before you did it, and I'm asking myself, one, are these areas in critical areas? No. Two, if it fills this in automatically, is it going to still accurately represent the way the jaw really is? I think it will. I mean, that's going to fill in flat across, and it's going to be exactly what it was prior. So analysis, inspector, let's auto repair everything, and this time it shouldn't leave any errors, because now it should be easy to repair and to make watertight all over. And once again, you do see that to be the case. Okay. Oh, last thing I wanted to do, the nerves. Remember these nerves? I like to subtract those out of the model. Kind of just makes for a cool study model. If you want to print and clear resin, you can inject these. So let's do this. Let's go up here to the nerves. I've selected them. This is a bit abstract, but these nerves a lot of times have a geometry that the software doesn't like when it's doing Boolean subtractions and things. Just take my word for it. Control A, select all of those nerve surfaces and hit R for remesh. And basically that's just going to analyze the mesh and kind of make it even evenly sized triangles throughout. Okay. For whatever reason, the software has a much easier time doing a Boolean subtraction of that kind of object as opposed to one with big long spiky triangles. So now I'm going to choose the jaw, control, select the nerves, and then Boolean difference. And of course it failed. Alright, so can we tell why it failed? Well, the only little thing I'm seeing highlighted is right here. Okay, so that is the culprit. And how can we fix it? Well, we could do a few things. You see it's kind of halfway in, halfway out of the mesh. I'm going to just use my select brush. And I'm going to push T for transform, and I just want to pull this on out. Okay. Something like that. Accept it. Well, let's give it another try. Still didn't like it. And why is that? Something is really irregular about this nerves mesh, even though I remeshed it. So that's kind of unusual. But, we got other options. Another really common option, just make it solid. As long as it does that without altering its shape, then we can accept that. And now try to subtract those solid nerves, and this time it works. This is the challenging part of Mesh Mixer, is you can't always just rely on one technique. I mean, some of those things are not intuitive whatsoever. I've just used this so much and run into so many problems that I've just kind of found ways to deal with them. And a lot of that just comes down to really understanding these 3D meshes. Like for example here, I know that mesh has crossed over itself because of the way the nerve was mapped. I didn't really look at the nerve mapping. This is not my case, but it was probably a rough nerve, and so I'm just taking my sculpting brush and I'm just smoothing out that rough area. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, I have beat this to death. This is far more effort than you should be putting into one of these, but I'm not really trying to do this as quick as possible. I'm trying to show you, methods you can use to do this more accurately. I don't know what else to do to this thing. It's perfectly watertight. Last thing I would do is just one more time run your inspector, and again we did find one more error that I had created. Okay. If you're bothered by something like this, smooth it out, or cut it out, or do something. What does that say about me that it does bother me? F for erase and fill. That's gone. Alright, I'm not messing with it anymore. I'm exporting it. I'm going to call this segmented jaw. Just overwrite the previous file. And I'm going to sit here and wait until this is done saying computing. All too often I've just immediately pushed it and then gone and grabbed it. And when it's overwriting another file, you can grab the original one and it's only partially overwritten. You pull it into Blue Sky Plan and it's just not all there. So wait till it's done and now grab this, pull it back into Blue Sky. And you don't need to stitch it. Remember, we've not changed its orientation. So let's turn off all of these other hints. Let's get rid of the segmentation data at this point, and let's just take a look at this. See how well we did. I wonder if we can get up the visibility toolbar. There we go. I want to hide that. Okay. I'm just looking at my boundary here and being absolutely sure that it follows it 100% all the way around, that there's no areas of bone that were missed, and that looks really nice. Again, a much cleaner STL because this is just one solid watertight surface. I'll hide these nerves as well. Here's the crest of the ridge. I may have barely included something that could have been artifact, but I would want to include that anyway. Let's look at this one. Let's start on one side and go all the way through the cross sections. That's perfect. That's perfect. Right up here is the area on the crest where a guide would seat. So this is where I'm going to be most critical. And it's looking good to me. Again, this is an easy case. We could have done this in 5 minutes, been done, but what would you have learned then? So this is great. We're done with the segmentation, and now you can go ahead and do whatever you want with it. You can get rid of these other two, frankly, because now you've got one perfectly segmented jaw. So those others are contributing nothing. You've got them hopefully in some of your other files. I usually keep a file on a case I'm working with of just miscellaneous stuff that, you know, maybe I don't want it in the case anymore, but I'd like to have it. If I need to redo something, I'll throw stuff like that in there. So that's basically it for this case.